My name is Richard, and for 25 years I believed that my marriage to Victoria was built on a foundation of trust, loyalty, and quiet devotion. We shared the small victories of daily life, morning coffees, heartfelt conversations, and long walks that we took without a care in the world. I prided myself on being the man who provided a secure home and a future full of promise. Yet, hidden beneath the comfort of our familiar routine, a slow and subtle betrayal was taking shape, one that would leave me shattered when the truth finally emerged. It started with little things: Victoria's late-night phone calls that she dismissed as work-related, unexplained absences when she claimed to be with friends, and fleeting glances at photographs of a past I had never known her to mention. At first, I dismissed these signs as the quirks of a long marriage. After all, everyone has a past. I trusted Victoria implicitly and assumed that any memory of a bygone era was harmless nostalgia. But gradually, the signs grew too frequent and too pointed to ignore. One rainy evening, when I returned home from work, I noticed an envelope lying on the entry table. Its handwriting was unfamiliar, a note that read only, "I'm sorry, but I've made my choice." My heart sank as I looked around, trying to recall if Victoria had mentioned any conflict or hidden plans. There was no explanation, only an icy dread that something was terribly wrong. Later that night, while I sat in our quiet living room trying to make sense of the note, I discovered further evidence: a set of receipts from upscale restaurants I had never been to, hotel keys hidden in a drawer, and a series of text messages from a number I did not recognize. Every piece of evidence pointed to one heartbreaking conclusion: Victoria had left me for someone else. I spent hours pacing the floor, rereading the messages and examining the receipts until the reality of the betrayal became inescapable. I realized that the woman I had trusted, the one who had promised to stand by my side through every storm, had been leading a double life. My mind raced with questions I dared not speak aloud. Who was this man? How long had this been going on? And why had Victoria chosen to abandon everything we had built together? In the days that followed, I attempted to reach out to Victoria. I called her repeatedly, leaving messages that begged for an explanation, yet every call went unanswered. Friends tried to offer sympathy, but their words did little to ease the mounting pain. I felt alone and exposed, as if my world had been cruelly upended without warning. The evidence of her betrayal became a constant companion, a reminder that my trust had been shattered, leaving me adrift in a sea of doubts and sorrow. I began to retrace our life together, searching for clues that might have hinted at her unfaithfulness. I examined old photographs, reread love letters, and recalled every quiet conversation we had shared over the years. It was then that a bitter realization took root. There were subtle moments when Victoria's eyes seemed to wander, when her laughter held an unfamiliar note of wistfulness. I had dismissed these as the quirks of a woman who had seen much in her life, but now they formed part of a larger pattern that I had been too blind to perceive. That night, as I sat in the darkness of our once happy home, a deep loneliness enveloped me. The silence was oppressive, and the weight of betrayal pressed down on every breath I took. I felt as though the very foundation of my existence was crumbling. I spent hours writing in my journal, each word an attempt to capture the profound hurt and confusion that now defined my days. I wrote about the note, the receipts, the missed calls, and the haunting realization that the woman I loved had chosen another. In my solitude, I resolved that I could no longer live in a state of ignorant acceptance. I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. With trembling determination, I decided that the next step was inevitable. I had to confront Victoria and force an explanation from the depths of her secret life. I was terrified of what I might hear, yet the need for closure outweighed my fear. I began to plan a meeting, a confrontation that I hoped would shed light on the mysteries that now tormented me. As the days turned into a haze of anger and despair, I felt the once familiar contours of my world dissolve into uncertainty. Every memory of our shared past became tainted with the knowledge of her betrayal. I questioned whether I had been a fool to trust so completely, whether the promises we had exchanged were nothing more than illusions that had been shattered by the cruelty of reality. The pain was unbearable, yet amidst the anguish, a small, stubborn spark of determination began to kindle. I vowed to reclaim my life, to find a way through the darkness, even if it meant facing the bitter truth head-on. At the close of one long, agonizing day, I sat by the window and watched the rain streak the glass, a silent witness to my sorrow. I knew that the journey ahead would be fraught with pain, that the confrontation with Victoria would not erase the betrayal, but it was a necessary step toward reclaiming the dignity and peace that had been ripped from me. The night was heavy with unanswered questions, but as I closed my journal and prepared to sleep, I resolved that tomorrow I would set forth on the path to confrontation and clarity. I had been betrayed by the one person I trusted most, and now I had to find a way to survive this cruelty and rebuild the life that had been torn apart. The day I had dreaded finally arrived, a day marked by an inner turmoil that left my hands shaking and my heart pounding with a mixture of rage and sorrow. I arranged for a meeting with Victoria at a quiet, inconspicuous cafe that had once been our favorite spot for peaceful mornings. I arrived early, my mind swirling with the questions I had rehearsed over countless sleepless nights. Every minute of waiting was an eternity, each second heavy with the anticipation of painful truths that would soon be revealed. When Victoria walked in, her appearance struck me first. The same elegant composure that I had once adored now seemed marred by a distant sadness. She approached the table slowly, avoiding my eyes, as if the simple act of meeting my gaze was too painful to bear. I could see in her expression that she knew the gravity of the situation, and yet she offered no explanation until I spoke. "Victoria," I began, my voice trembling with barely contained emotion, "I need to understand. How could you leave me for him? How could you choose your past over our future?" My words, raw and unfiltered, hung in the air like a heavy shroud. There was a long, painful silence before she finally replied, her voice soft and laced with regret. "I never meant to hurt you, Richard," she said, her eyes downcast as if hiding a torrent of unspoken truths. I have loved you, and I still do, but there's a part of me that I can't ignore. I reconnected with someone from my past, a man who once made me feel alive, who reminded me of who I used to be." Each word cut deeper than the last. I could feel the betrayal seeping into every fiber of my being, transforming the life we had built into a series of shattered promises. Victoria went on to confess that her relationship with her ex had been rekindled over time. What had started as a casual meeting had grown into something more profound, a passion that she claimed was her true love. The revelation was almost too much to bear, as I struggled to reconcile the woman I had known with this stranger who now held her heart. My mind reeled with disbelief. How could the person I had shared my life with choose someone from her past? How had I been so blind to the growing distance between us? Then came the words that shattered whatever remaining hope I had clung to. In a moment of painful clarity, Victoria revealed that even our daughter, Emily, had expressed that her ex was her true love. The admission that our own child had witnessed her mother's shifting affections and had even come to believe that this ex-lover was the one who truly captured Victoria's heart felt like the final, crushing blow. I sat there in silence, each syllable echoing through the empty spaces of my soul, as if confirming that my worst nightmares had come to life. The cafe around us seemed to fade away as I focused solely on the raw emotion of that moment. I asked her repeatedly why she had allowed this to happen, why she had chosen to betray the vows we had exchanged so long ago. Victoria's answers were a jumble of regret and resignation. She explained that the feelings for her ex had been building for years, fueled by memories of a youth when she felt vibrant and free. She admitted that she had tried to suppress these feelings, to honor the life we had built, but eventually, the lure of her past proved too powerful to resist. Every word was a dagger, each admission deepening the wound that already threatened to consume me entirely. I struggled to process the fact that the love I thought was unbreakable had been undermined by a passion that belonged to another time, a time that now held sway over her heart. The enormity of the betrayal overwhelmed me, and I felt as though the world had stopped turning. I could no longer imagine a future where the trust between us could be repaired, where the scars of this moment would ever fade. As the conversation wore on, the tears I had held back began to spill over. I could see the pain in Victoria's eyes as she tried to justify her actions, but no justification could erase the knowledge of her betrayal. Our dialogue, filled with desperate questions and anguished answers, ended in a silence that spoke volumes, an unbearable quiet where only the shattered remnants of our once-cherished love remained. I left the cafe that day with a heart heavy with sorrow and a mind filled with 1,000 unanswered questions. Every step I took felt like a march toward an uncertain future, one in which the past, with all its painful memories, threatened to define everything that lay ahead. The truth, as devastating as it was, had been laid bare before me, leaving me to wonder whether I could ever find a way to rebuild what had been so cruelly torn apart. That night, in the solitude of our now empty home, I tried to piece together the remnants of my shattered world. I sat in the silence of our bedroom, staring at the empty space where Victoria once lay, and I realized that the love we once shared had become irretrievably tainted. The betrayal was not just an act of infidelity, it was the dismantling of the very foundation of trust that had sustained us for decades. And though I did not yet know what the future would hold, I understood that I could no longer remain a prisoner of this heartbreak. I had to find a way to move forward, even if that meant facing the truth with a courage I had never known before. In the aftermath of the painful confrontation with Victoria, the world around me seemed to crumble further when an unexpected confession from our daughter, Emily, added another layer to my torment. I had always believed that children, in their innocence, saw only what was apparent: love, trust, and stability. Yet one afternoon, as I sat alone in the quiet study trying to come to terms with the events of the past few days, Emily approached me with hesitant steps and trembling eyes. "Dad," she began softly, her voice filled with a mixture of sorrow and determination, "I need to tell you something important." I looked at her, sensing that her words would shatter the fragile remnants of my already broken heart. She took a deep breath and continued, "I overheard Mom talking with one of her friends. I heard her say that her ex is her true love." The words hung in the air like a curse, each syllable echoing with the finality of a verdict that I could neither deny nor escape. I sat in stunned silence as Emily explained how, one quiet evening when the house was empty, she had unintentionally overheard a conversation between Victoria and her friend. In that moment, the phrase "true love" had been uttered, a phrase that cut deeper than any betrayal I had experienced. Emily's innocent yet anguished recounting left me numb. How could it be that the very person who was supposed to nurture and protect our family had allowed such a painful truth to seep into our lives? I could see the conflict in her eyes, the desperate need to share something so terrible, even though it would hurt me. Emily's confession forced me to confront the painful reality that the betrayal was not merely an affair of passion. It was an emotional abandonment that had infiltrated every corner of our family. Our daughter, once the light of my life, had become an unwilling witness to the unraveling of the bonds that held us together. The knowledge that she believed her mother's ex to be her true love was a betrayal of a different kind, a betrayal of the trust that a child places in the sanctity of her family. As Emily continued, her voice quivered with tears as she tried to explain that she only wanted me to know the truth so that nothing could be hidden any longer. "I didn't want to hurt you, Dad," she whispered, "but I couldn't keep lying for Mom." I felt a tidal wave of emotions crash over me: grief, anger, and an overwhelming sense of isolation. My daughter's words validated the pain I had felt, confirming that Victoria's betrayal was not a fleeting indiscretion but a deliberate choice rooted in a deep, unyielding passion for her past. Every moment of our shared life, every tender memory, now became tainted by the knowledge that the love I had known was a fragile illusion, shattered by truths that could no longer be denied. In the days that followed Emily's confession, our home was filled with a heavy silence. I could see the hurt in her eyes every time we crossed paths, and I felt responsible for protecting her innocence even as my own world lay in ruins. I tried to comfort her, assuring her that we would find a way to heal, even though I felt hopeless and alone. Yet, every time I looked at her, I was reminded that our family had been irrevocably changed. The betrayal was no longer just between Victoria and me, it had seeped into the core of our family, leaving scars that I knew would take years to mend. Determined to find some semblance of closure, I began to document every detail of that painful confession in my journal. I wrote about the moment Emily had chosen to confide in me, the way her voice had trembled as she spoke, and the raw honesty that had forced me to confront the full extent of Victoria's betrayal. Each word I penned was both a cathartic release and a painful reminder of the loss I had suffered. I wondered if, someday, the truth would allow us to rebuild a relationship on a foundation of honesty, or if the wounds would remain too deep to heal. In quiet moments of reflection, I recalled the days when our family had been whole, when laughter had filled the rooms and hope had glimmered in our eyes. Now, that hope was dimmed by the stark reality of betrayal, and yet I could not help but cling to a fragile desire for redemption. Emily's confession, as devastating as it was, had also opened a door to understanding the depth of the betrayal. A betrayal that was not merely about infidelity, but about the disintegration of trust and love at the very heart of our family. That evening, as I sat with Emily at the kitchen table, I reached out and took her hand. In that simple gesture, I silently promised her that we would face the future together, that despite the pain and the shattered dreams, we would find a way to heal. The road ahead was uncertain, and the scars of this betrayal would never fully fade, but in that moment, the warmth of our connection offered a glimmer of hope, a promise that love, however battered, could one day be rebuilt. In the weeks that followed the revelations and the heart-wrenching confessions, I was forced to confront a future that was forever altered by betrayal. The days passed in a haze of sorrow, anger, and reluctant acceptance. My life, once anchored by the solidity of a long-term marriage and the promise of a shared future, now lay in ruins, rearranged by the cruel choices of the one I had loved most. Yet amidst the devastation, I resolved to find a way forward, to reclaim what remained of my identity and forge a path toward healing. I began by seeking solace in long, solitary walks, where the cool air and the quiet rustle of leaves provided a temporary escape from the constant ache in my heart. With every step along familiar streets now shrouded in memories of better times, I tried to piece together who I was beyond the confines of betrayal. I revisited old hobbies and reconnected with friends who had always been there for me. And slowly, I began to understand that while Victoria's choices had shattered our marriage, they did not define my entire being. Counseling became a refuge, a space where I could pour out my grief and anger, where the raw wounds of betrayal could be acknowledged and slowly healed. In the sessions, I learned that forgiveness was not an act of condoning the hurt, but rather a necessary step toward freeing myself from the chains of the past. I grappled with difficult questions. Could I ever trust again? Would the scars of this betrayal forever mar my ability to love? Each session brought me a little closer to the realization that healing was a process, a journey that required time, patience, and the courage to confront the darkest parts of my soul. Throughout this painful journey, my daughter Emily remained my steadfast source of comfort and hope. Despite her own bruised heart, she showed a resilience that inspired me. Together, we shared quiet moments of understanding, long conversations over tea, walks in the park, and even laughter that, though tinged with sadness, reminded me that life could still hold moments of beauty. Her unwavering honesty had forced me to face a truth that was unbearable, yet in her eyes, I saw the promise of a future where we could rebuild our family, however altered it might be. Victoria, for her part, gradually withdrew into a silence that left me with more questions than answers. I knew that confronting her repeatedly would not restore what we had lost. It would only serve to deepen the wound. Instead, I resolved to let time be the measure of our healing. I sent her letters, not demanding explanations or apologies, but simply expressing my need to understand and move on. I wrote about the pain of betrayal, the weight of shattered trust, and the hope that perhaps one day we could both find peace. I never received the answers I sought, but through that process, I learned to accept that some truths remain forever elusive. As the months passed, the sharp edges of my grief began to soften. The memories of our happier times, once drowned out by the agony of betrayal, started to emerge in quiet moments of reflection. I learned that while the scars of a broken marriage might never fully vanish, they could serve as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is the potential for renewal and growth. I began to envision a future defined not by the pain of what had been lost, but by the possibility of what could be rebuilt. My life would no longer revolve solely around the memories of betrayal. It would be enriched by the small victories of self-discovery and the strength found in vulnerability. I set goals for myself, new projects at work, volunteering in the community, and even exploring interests that I had long set aside. Every step toward rebuilding my identity was a silent act of defiance against the cruelty of the past. In the quiet of my study, surrounded by the mementos of a life once shared, I made a solemn vow. I would honor the pain as well as the hope that had emerged from this crucible of betrayal. I would not let the actions of another dictate my future. Instead, I would forge a new path, a life where trust, though fragile, could be rebuilt slowly and with deliberate care. The journey ahead was uncertain, and I knew that there would be days when the shadows of that terrible betrayal would threaten to engulf me. Yet, I was determined to embrace each day with the conviction that healing was possible and that my worth was not defined by the love I had lost, but by the strength I had discovered in its absence. Now, as I look toward tomorrow, I see the future not as a blank canvas stained with regret, but as an opportunity for redemption, a chance to reclaim the parts of me that had been buried beneath the weight of betrayal. The road ahead may be long and winding, and the scars of the past may never fully fade, but with each new sunrise, I choose to step forward with hope, resilience, and a quiet determination to rebuild my life on my own terms.